Do you think that, and I was just talking about this with James, tell me if I'm misspeaking when it comes to gender, but I'm kind of speaking generally. With women, the woman's eating disorder is the man's porn addiction. What do you think about that? I think that, like, on the content level of it, it's obviously different. But I think the messages, the internalized shame, the internal process is very similar and is reinforced by these bigger systemic forces like media. What do you think?
I think I've never thought about this before, so that's super interesting. Um,
Ooh.
I think that speaking towards gender, anecdotally in my experience, the vast majority of the teens I saw in that partial hospitalization setting were women, were
Yeah.
cis girls,
Yes.
um, who were interested in dating men. Um, don't have any research to back that up, but the vast majority in my anecdotal
Like
experience is that
vast majority as what? Like 90%? 9
I
out of
can
10?
yeah, yeah,
8 out
yep,
of 10? So
nine
like
out, yeah,
higher majority.
high majority. But let me think. So porn addiction. So I've worked with unwanted sexual desires, but mostly as it relates to OCD in terms of like that is the topic of their obsession. And with people with OCD over the span of a lifetime, their obsessions can change between like sexually intrusive thoughts to intrusive thoughts about harm or whatever else. So it's not quite the same. But
It's
that
not
being said,
content. Yeah. Well, it's not about the content, right? Like it's the
it's
inner.
it's like the weird systems, and we can get into that later. But let me think. I could say I do agree with it is shame fueled by like the overall system. We'll talk more about it. So tell me more about why you feel that way.
I think that like both things are kind of a compulsion reinforced by culture. And I think there's a ritual part of it for both of them.
Tell me why that with porn addiction, like why is that true? What does that look like?
Well, so 90% of men use porn. 90%. 9
Wow.
out of 10 people. And um
What
it's
does use porn mean? Like once in their lifetime or like once a week? That's
use
hyper
it
specific.
like regularly.
Okay, okay.
Regular, yeah, I know. I mean,
Sorry.
I no, it's okay. And I think like most women, I would say generally have disordered eating. I wouldn't say like an eating disorder. It's kind of the same thing. Maybe like disordered porn use and disordered eating is maybe the level that I'm talking about instead of like porn addiction and then an
Mm,
eating disorder, like diagnostic criteria. It's
yeah.
more of like disordered use that maybe has some rituals and compulsions to it where it's just like what you're doing and you don't even think about it most of the time. And
So
it
just for the viewer, I want to break that down. So like with eating disorders and disordered in eating disorders a diagnosis, whereas disordered eating is just eating that has some not healthy components
wait,
to it.
slow down. An eating disorder is a diagnosis,
Well, it's a diagnostic category, yeah.
which means what to people? What does
Like
that mean?
anorexia, bulimia,
So it's a
um,
clinical term.
yes, but disordered eating, which is annoying that it's just the two words flipped, is more of like your eating might not have some great beliefs behind it, but it's not to the point of where it's a clinical thing. Like in the same way,
Where
everybody
it's
feels anxiety, but that doesn't mean you have generalized anxiety disorder.
And generally, what makes it a diagnostic thing is when it's interfering with your life to the point where you can't, where it's affecting your functioning.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
So
two,
school,
usually,
work, friendships, personal image,
like,
relationships. Yeah,
yeah. So how severe is it that it's affecting your functioning? And then two, how distressed are you about it? That's
exactly.
like typically what makes things diagnostic, and
Yes,
typically what pushes people over the edge to seek clinical help is like this is really stressing me out and I cannot control how often I do it. It's affecting my work and my relationships. So
exactly.
that's the difference between the two. And I would argue it's the same with porn use. Like maybe it's affecting your life to the point where you can't get it up with your, and I'm talking about
Mm-hmm.
cis het men. Is that the right cis men? I don't
Cis
know.
men, yeah.
Cis men. Um, where it's affecting your relationships. I mean, so Blake, this guy on an episode, he called porn addiction an intimacy disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And I would argue eating disorder is the same thing. You're internalizing your negative emotions, and it's like a compulsive, or you can be like reaction to not being connected with either yourself, with other people. It's like and I'm kind of speaking more abstractly than like precisely.
Yeah, I could say like on paper, if you're going to take like a research route, not necessarily, but on like a more social, like outside of the clinical office, there are definite similar structures in place of like, I don't feel good about myself. So like, I'm going to do something about it. Or I don't feel like I fit in. So I need to do these things.
Yeah, or like I don't have control in this area, so I'm gonna have control in this area. Or
Yeah.
like I need an escape, like binge eating, or like sitting in front of the TV, dissociating, eating a whole bag, whatever, bag of
Yeah.
chips. We all do that like every day, like
But
I'm
to
just
the point
saying
of where, yeah.
where it's affecting your functioning, it gets out of control. You can't stop, and you don't, and it's there's no end in sight because your life circumstances are not changing. Like
You're
you
trying
know,
to change what's on the inside because you can't change what's on the outside.
that's right. That's right. So that's why I think they're similar. And I'm talking about them in that way in general. Like, and so I was just curious because you are more precise and more. And I do think the treatment of it is the same. This goes back to me as like suppressed emotions, not knowing how to deal with your emotions and how to like integrate them into your life. And that's something you need to learn when you're, a kid, but especially when you're a teenager. And to me, there's a lot of factors involved, but like one of them, I think, is being the over responsible one as a teenager.
Yeah.
And that's, I don't know. And so if you didn't have a teenager phase, you're probably somebody that wants to rest, that imagines their life on the beach when they retire or in the country, or like fantasizing about making a lot of money and doing whatever you want. It's because you haven't grieved the child. It's because you haven't grieved the childhood you didn't have.
Yeah, I mean, that's super interesting to think about.
I'm glad I caught you off guard with it, and you agree, and that's you're just like, maybe you'll think about it, and maybe you'll come up with other stuff. But
yeah, and be like,
wait,
I changed my mind.
Yeah, I got you at a good time.
I like them. Yeah, when it's early in the morning, I'm a lot more. I'm less skeptical because I just not online yet.
Yeah, right. It's ideal time for me.
Ideal time for you.